Thanks to Douglas E. French for being with us today. Doug is a former banker. He earned his master's degree in economics under Murray Rothbard at UNLV. Doug is also a prolific writer for LouRockwell.com. Take a look at his archive. Doug, I was reminded of you today when I was looking up something on Wikipedia, and on the front page their featured article was on TulipoManía. And, of course, part of your master's thesis was exactly on this earlier crazy boom and bust. Any lessons to be learned from that earlier period for what we're going through today?
I think there is, Lou, and thank you for having me on. TulipoManía doesn't come up every day, but it's generally recognized as the first irrational boom, if you will, that occurred in the Amsterdam tulip market between 1634 and 1637. And it's gotten various treatment by economists. It was interesting in my work for the thesis I did under Murray Rothbard's direction. There were many economists that tried to explain away TulipoManía as just a rational part of the marketplace. But the idea that a tulip bulb, and certainly not the flower, but that a bulb that was planted in the ground, that you really had no idea what the flower would look like until 9 to 12 months later, could trade for more than the ground that was planted in, or more than an ox, or various other items in Amsterdam at that time, was incredible. And the price of some of these bulbs went up 35 times during that period. So there was tremendous trading in these bulbs, these instruments. It was very similar to, say, the tech stock boom. It's not altogether different than the real estate boom we've had. Various people got involved in it. There have been some writers that contend that the trading in tulip bulbs was limited to a few Mennonite families in Amsterdam at the time, but it certainly seemed to be widespread by most historic accounts. And there was certainly a mania. There was options written on these tulip bulbs and various credit that was created to buy these tulip bulbs. So it had all the earmarks of what we've seen with modern-day booms. What is interesting is that when the market did crash in 1637, there was no Hank Paulson to try to bail out the tulip buyers. So the boom and bust of previous eras tended to correct themselves very quickly. This is a point that Murray used to make often in writing about historical panics, is that without the government intervening, the market would clear these malinvestments very quickly, and life would go on. What was unusual about the work that I did in terms of TulipoManía is that nobody previously had looked into the monetary aspects of TulipoManía. There was no central bank necessarily intervention as what was thought, that this was just a natural sort of animal spirits had taken over the people of Amsterdam. There was this sort of fatalistic sort of idea, well, gee, let's go ahead and trade in tulip bulbs because who cares, we're going to be dead soon. But there was actually none of that really holds up very well. But what does hold up is the fact that the Bank of Amsterdam was providing free coinage during that time. And as coin and bullion specie from all over Europe began to flood into Amsterdam for this free coinage, we saw huge increases in the supply of money. Albeit it was hard money, it was bullion, but there were tremendous increases in both silver and gold. So you had a classic, in my view, a classic kind of Austrian business cycle that occurred without the typical central bank paper intervention that we have today.
Doug, you also wrote about the Mississippi Bubble. Any lessons from that?
Well, Mississippi Bubble was essentially John Law's brainchild, if you will. And John Law's a very interesting character. He'd participated in some duels. He actually shot a man and was fleeing throughout Europe and found his way to France. And so he had had a system, they called it, to essentially monetize the assets of the country, and it was essentially to create a currency that was backed by all the land in France and the rest of its assets. So he created this as the king of the time, or the finance minister. They initially turned it down, but eventually he got his way and got his system in place. And he had made the case that paper money was much more efficient than gold or silver. It was much more valuable, and there was a ease of delivery. There was the same value everywhere, and divisible without a loss. He said capable of a stamp, stable quantity. He insisted that paper money was more of these qualities than silver. So he tried to make the case that silver was inferior to paper, which of course is nonsense. Murray spelled out the necessary qualities for money, that they be generally marketable, in other words, that they have a non-monetary value, that they be divisible, they have a high value per unit of weight, fairly stable supply, durable, recognizable, and homogeneous. And so even though they kind of had similar lists, John Law's idea that paper holds up as well as silver, of course, is rather dubious. But he increased the money supply tremendously, and there was then shares of the East India Company, the Mississippi Company, that this money was traded in, and eventually the system came crashing down. But this occurred in 1716, and Law was given tremendous power, but at the end, I don't remember exactly, he may have just escaped the guillotine, I believe.
Well, Doug, we know these previous crises were called Tulipmania or the Mississippi Bubble. I wonder if this one's going to be called Greenspan Mania or the Greenspan Bubble.
Well, I don't know how kindly history will treat Mr. Greenspan. That'd be very interesting. He's made great efforts on the lecture circuit to kind of absolve himself of any wrongdoing or responsibility in this. It's hard to imagine that he can do that. I mean, grew the money supply by an extraordinary amount while his term in office. He told the American people, he advised them that they should all take out adjustable rate mortgages and to save on interest costs. Even with government debt, he urged the government, instead of locking in low long-term rates, they should always borrow short-term. And so it'll be a question to see, many years down the road. He's revered as this great thinker, the maestro, of course he's called, but we'll see how history treats him. He may end up in the same category as John Law.
Stephen Glass was a writer for the New Republic. He turned out to be a very creative writer. He was making up all his stories and was a long time before he was discovered. Just, of course, some of the many lies that have appeared in the New Republic over the years. But he had one story where Greenspan was being worshipped, and I mean literally worshipped, by a group of Wall Street traders. They had a little sort of Buddha-like figure of Greenspan, and they were burning incense in front of this. And the fact was that, nobody saw through that as crazy, or rather we saw it as crazy, but nobody thought it must be a fiction, because this was back during the hysteria of the boom, and indeed Greenspan was pretty much worshipped. But I also remember Murray Rothbard saying that Ayn Rand had nicknames for all the members of her inner circle, and her nickname for Greenspan was the Undertaker. So I guess that indeed is what he turned out to be.
Yeah, absolutely. All those mornings he spent in the bathtub going over economic statistics, he's revered as some kind of a guru, while he got all wrinkly in the tub. But to be a follower of Ayn Rand and then to turn around and create the kind of money supply that he did, and create a bubble, perpetrate it, and then subsequently make the case that nobody knows when you're in a bubble, and he certainly couldn't have done anything about it, is again, I'm not sure history will treat him as kindly as he's been treated so far.
Doug French, thanks for coming on today, and thanks for being a voice for honest money and honest banking, not only today but historically.
Thank you, Lou.
I want to urge everybody to take a look at Doug's archive on LouRockwell.com, read his articles, and Doug, thanks a million.